Good morning again, everybody. Again, I'll be brief here. I'm mostly just here to introduce folks. Again, my name is Bill Ayers, the Interim Dean and Chief Administrative Officer here at Kent State Ashtabula. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce one of our superstars. She claims not to be, but we do have a panel of folks. There's only one person sitting in front of you, but we're talking about the cyber world today, so there are invisible people up here that you can't see that we've got in that computer. So we have a panel of folks who are going to talk to you today about cybersecurity. That panel is led Shelley Marshall. Shelley is the lead faculty for the Information Technology program at Kent State University. Not Kent State University Trumbull, Kent State University. She is also a proud member of our faculty here at Ashtabula, and we love having her here. She's got colleagues all around the regional campus system, and she's doing a tremendous job leading that program. So she'll be our kind of lead organizer today. We also have Jeff Brancato. He is Executive Director of the Northeast Ohio Cyber Consortium. We've got Kevin Vargo, who's another one of our faculty in Information Technology. And we have Jim Raber, who is Associate Chief Information Officer for Support, Infrastructure, and Research Technology for Kent State University. And again, that's not Kent State Ashtabula, that's the entire university. So he works in the university's IT office and providing that kind of support. So it's a long title, but we like long titles in universities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shelley and let her kick it off.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to see all of you today. I know it's a warm day outside, so you'd probably rather be outside than talking to us about cybersecurity. But cybersecurity is everyone's job, right? We know that because we know how the breaches happen, right? And it's usually some mistake or some lack of knowledge or some lack of awareness that brings us to a breach, right? So we're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to talk about some of the barriers that we find in cybersecurity across enterprises. We're going to talk about the threat landscape that we face. We're going to talk about training and testing, because if you train and don't test, how do you know that it works, right? And then we're going to talk about resources. After this short presentation, though, I would like to send you a survey to find out what kind of topical information you'd like us to cover in some lunch and learn type seminars. Because obviously we have just a few minutes today to talk about some of the really important aspects of cybersecurity, and we would love to sit with you, over the next 12 months and really dive into some of these topics with you, with your IT folks, with your, anyone that you feel would benefit from this kind of conversation and work. So some of the common barriers to cybersecurity, we all sort of know them, right? Maybe intuitively. But some of them are, we don't really think about, right? Keeping security in only IT. Cybersecurity is everyone's job. If IT is the only people thinking about and working on cybersecurity, then there's going to be big gaps in how you approach and protect your enterprise. So we need to make sure that we're bringing the security mindset out of IT and making it everyone's awareness, right? Focusing on the cyber attack instead of prevention. Sometimes we end up being firefighters, right? We're always in this sort of response mode instead of prevention. And prevention works a lot better, just like in any other thing that we do in our lives, right? Prevention is better than response. Sometimes we make things overly complex in our security apparatus. And when we do that, end users tend to find a way around that, which makes us less secure, right? So we need to be aware of the fact that we have to keep that, we call it the CIA triad, which is confidentiality, integrity and availability. So confidentiality means that we are able to keep everything in our enterprise safe. Integrity means that we can say for sure that what we have is what we think we have, right? But availability means that the people who need access to something have the right access, and only enough access for what they need to do, and that it's not overly complex or overly complicated, right? Because we don't want them going around it. We don't want them writing their 85-character password on a sticky note and putting it on their monitor, right? It doesn't help anyone. So, and it helps someone. It helps someone who wants to break into their computer, right? So it's better if they put their username and their password on the sticky note, but we don't want them doing either. Some other challenges or barriers to good cybersecurity is at the user level, right? We don't always know what we don't know. And the threat landscape changes so quickly that it's very difficult for us to keep everyone on the same page about where the risks are, right? What kind of link can I click on from my email? What kind of document can I download? How do I know this document is from who it says it's from, right? There's so many threats. And so keeping everyone apprised of that can be a challenge. And one of the other speakers is going to talk about that. But another aspect of that is a lack of buy-in, right? That's IT's problem. That's IT's responsibility. IT should make sure that we don't get things that we shouldn't click on. It's everyone's job, right? But if we don't know what we don't know, then we can't protect our enterprise and we can't protect ourselves, right? Not having good acceptable use policies. This is something that, maybe we just don't think that our end users need that guidance. But having a good acceptable use policy helps everyone. Everyone understands what they're allowed to use on their work computer, what kind of software they can download, what kind of social media they're allowed to use in the workplace. All of those things are critically important to the cybersecurity infrastructure. And if you don't tell them, they don't know, right? So it's important that we build these policies and then we train and test, right? Some other things to think about are third-party risks. These are things that we don't commonly think of as in our realm of control, but they really are. So when you think about third-party risk, you think about apps that people are using on their work phone, their work computer, third-party cloud-based services. Are they allowed to store their stuff on Google Drive? Are they allowed to save it on OneDrive? Are they allowed to save it on whatever flavor of the day cloud storage? Is it safe? Is it secure? Do they own the data? What are their security policies? All these things that as end users, we don't think about that. And so we need to train people and have acceptable use policies that help us to avoid getting into those traps, right? Those areas where there may not be enough support or enough security. Another thing to think about is because we have more remote work, there's a lot more people working from home. Am I on the right? Yep. A lot more people working from home, and they may not have secure routers in their house, right? Their router could be compromised. Their computer could be compromised. Their 5-year-old could log into their computer and go to a site that, compromises your work computer. So again, having acceptable use policies, having good training apparatus, and making sure that when workers are working from home, they have a good VPN, they have good encryption on their laptop, they have good malware protection. These are all things that we probably just don't think about. And when the pandemic sent all of us home, we didn't have time for, right? We just had to work through it. And so there was this huge amount of risk that we didn't really have time to plan for, but now we do, right? Now we have that time. The other threat is this concept of bring your own device, right? Everyone has a device or 10. My kids, when I look at my network at home and I'm like, we have 50 devices connected, like 3 of us are here today. So, so bring your own device. You know, if somebody brings in their laptop to your network and their laptop has malware on it, they plug into your network, guess what? Now your network has been exposed to that as well. They bring in their personal phone, they connect to your network. Everything on their phone is now on your network, and vice versa. So I just heard an example of somebody who has their own phone and they were doing remote work for their business, and they weren't using a VPN or encryption on their phone. They lost their phone on vacation and somebody breached that network because they had full access to it from that phone. So these are things that we need to plan for, we need to think about, we need to prevent, right? And the best way to do that is to have good policy. All right, so we started a little bit late, so I'm not gonna cover the rest of it because it's, much of the same. But planning for disaster, planning for incident response, planning for a communication plan, these are all things that we can follow up with lunch and learn sessions, do tabletop exercises, talk about how to do asset control, how to make sure that you're doing all of the things that you can to prevent a cyber attack, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so being prepared is the other half of the battle, prevention and preparedness, right? So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues here. And Kevin Vargo is going to be our next speaker. Let's see if we can get them up here. Hey, Kevin, can you hear us?
I do, Shelley. I just shared my slides.
Yep.
Can you see them?
Well, let me see if I can get rid of mine.
Sure. I see a thumbs up.
There you go. You're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for your time this morning. My name is Kevin Vargo, and I am an adjunct faculty member at Kent State, Ashtabula. In addition to that role, I also work as a cybersecurity practitioner for a private company in Aurora, and have been there for roughly 25 years. One of my roles is looking for newer emerging threats and vulnerabilities, and in doing so, I try to ensure that the current layers of defense would prevent the exploitation of those findings. So a lot of what Shelley had mentioned, I tend to look at day to day. So just for the next few minutes, I'll just review a little bit about what the threat landscape looks like in general. So no matter the size of the company, your company or organization, cybersecurity is a crucial element for continued success today. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that may be different, but today it's definitely relevant. In many cases, small and medium-sized businesses, they share several similarities when it comes to cybersecurity. As a little bit of what Shelley had alluded to, dedicated staff isn't always present, and if there is one, training and budgets are often inadequate. It's typically difficult for smaller companies to respond to threats quickly enough, as well as being able to detect the unusual activity. Third, and one of the big ones, and I think what a lot of this presentation kind of gets to, is that we've seen historically that employees unknowingly help cyber criminals attack their business. So that seems to be the result of staff members wanting to be overly helpful to potential customers. And as a result, you're actually more prone to social engineering, emails, and even phone call scams. Other kind of similarities between smaller businesses, they usually lack layers of protection, and there's more low-hanging fruit for adversaries to grab onto. And then lastly, backup recovery plans, they often don't exist. I think psychologically, a lot of people in the small business community believe that you won't be attacked because there's relatively little value, which is not true. And others think, you know, why would somebody want to attack us? And even worse, I believe, some people believe cybersecurity is a problem that only a company with a technical staff can address. And the truth is, any business with an online presence is subject to cyber attacks. Cybersecurity should be an important concern to every organization, large or small. And truth be told, year over year, small and medium-sized businesses are becoming actually more targeted than larger corporations. And back to the comment that Shelley had made about third-party, other threats include hackers that piggyback access that your organization might have into larger companies with perhaps more secure systems, which betrays the trust of your organization has created. So if you can imagine, you have a partnership with a larger company, and some of you might, you're providing some specialized product or service to them. Now, imagine if that lack of security or employee training in your company allowed a threat to compromise not only you, but then your partner company as well. Moving on to the different sectors, just to kind of give a little bit of an overview where we know a breach has occurred over the past few years. Healthcare, public sector, education, technology. Keep in mind, these are just the ones that are documented, right, or reported. These numbers are probably skewed in that way to some degree. And then over on the right, the United States, probably most people would guess is the #1 target for cybercrime. If we zoom in just a little bit, we see plenty of local examples where cybercrime has occurred. And note that in all of these are not large corporations, right? These kind of represent the chart in the previous slide. And again, it's just to reiterate, the online presence or you having an internet-connected machine means that you are a potential victim. Consequences of cyber attack. So outside of potential data loss, lost productivity, loss of trust, the average data breach for a smaller business can be anywhere between $100,000 to just over a million. I think it's like $1.4 million. 30 million companies in the U.S. have less than 1,000 employees and less than $1 billion in revenue. 2/3 of those have had a cybersecurity incident between 2018 and 2020. And again, that's just what was reported. So just to touch on the three most common cyber attack means or methods. Phishing, malware, and password attacks are the most common mediums. Phishing is responsible for more than 80% of all cases of data breaches. So training users, continuously educating them to spot phishing emails drastically decreases the risk. And by continuously educating, I mean just maybe a monthly posting or some sort of poster that you might have, like tax season is basically underway, so that means more phishing emails right now are going to be geared towards taxes. It's good to remind people of that. Phishing, or more generally social engineering, it's an attempt to obtain information through masquerading as a trustworthy source or someone in need of assistance. Phishing emails will continue to be a major contributor to compromise, and attacks like spear phishing or business email compromise, they continue to threaten businesses as well. Adversaries typically utilize social engineering tactics to deceive employees. They are looking to aid in financial fraud, giving out private information, or downloading malware. And malware by itself, that's unwanted software, usually malicious in nature. it'd be safe to say that a system with malware installed on it was the result of it at one point in the past becoming compromised. And one example of malware is ransomware. This is software that encrypts your data so it becomes unavailable to you or your organization. And in many cases now, pretty much over the past couple of years, adversaries are stealing your data first, and then they encrypt it. And then they threaten to expose the data unless they receive payment. So that's but a newer tactic. One interesting finding recently is malware-free activity, and this is essentially activity where adversaries are abusing legitimate credentials to get access and to persist in victim environments. So that kind of leads me to the last one here, password attacks. Adversaries attempt to crack or guess users' passwords so that they can essentially impersonate that user, and they have access to the same data, which again goes back to Shelley's point of why the least amount of privilege needed is the best kind of protocol or step to take. User password or passphrase, as I like to say, it's extremely important, as is using multi-factor authentication. A 15-character password or passphrase should be the minimum length allowed in an organization, at least in my opinion. This really helps reduce the risk of compromise.
Thank you, Kevin.
So just wanted to, yeah, sorry.
For time, you have about 2 more minutes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll fly. I just don't have a few slides left. This list here, it's taken from a data breach report. If anybody's interested in reading through that, my email's at the end of the slide. I can provide it. It's roughly 40 adversary groups that strike small and medium-sized businesses. What a lot of this boils down to is the most serious attacks in 2022 weren't overly sophisticated attacks or displays of some kind of cyber magic. Instead, attacks were practical, simplistic, and very prosperous. Threat actors such as hacktivists or young street criminals and a slew of ransomware ecosystem groups, they dominated the cyber criminal population. And they're always looking for creative strategies and new means and mediums to broaden the target audience. Typically through unpatched systems or just configurations that don't meet security standards. One of the last things I'll mention is access brokers. These are relatively new. These are people that break into your network and gain access, and then they sell that access to other people. In 2022, there were about 2,500 advertisements on the dark web for people selling essentially credentials to companies. And you could kind of think of it as an eBay high bidder gets the access, which is a little scary. Lastly, just some questions you can think about regarding risk. Likelihood times impact, that's usually the best way to kind of target where you want to prioritize your cybersecurity efforts. And then on my last slide is just some closing tips on things that you might want to do that I'm sure Jim or Jeff will probably allude to as well. And I think Shelley's going to hand out these slides, so feel free to ping me with questions or comments in my email, and I'd be happy to discuss further. It's a passion of mine, so
Thank you.
I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Jim?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Just click the button here to get into presentation mode. Hope everyone's doing well.
They're all still awake.
Hey, all right. Good. All right, so what I wanted to chat a little bit about was around training and testing, which I definitely view as a critical path to mitigating risk. And the first thing I'll say is, it's the key word there is mitigation. There's nothing bulletproof. It's a fact of life. That at some point, under most scenarios, it's a matter of when, not if. But the farther we can kick the can down the road on the when is the key thing here. So first, what is cybersecurity training? Basically, it trains and teaches employees and stakeholders basically the importance of digital security, how to practice good cyber hygiene both at work and at home. Because I mean, anymore, I look at the way I interact with my devices, right? I mean, I've got a personal cell phone that has work email on it, and that line between work and personal life is definitely blurred in the modern age. How to recognize signs of social engineering, how to spot phishing, fakes, and potentially risky interactions. As Kevin mentioned, phishing is perhaps one of the biggest threat vectors that any industry faces. That 80% stat should make everyone kind of pause and think about their email for a second. And then also, how to react if something happens. I mean, going back to my earlier comment about it being a matter of when, not if. So if when an employee runs into something and, they get owned or they lose credentials or they get hit with ransomware, being, just like, emergency response, right? Time matters. So if something happens, what is the point of escalation? Who do they tell? What actions are taken is often, a pretty good indicator of whether or not organizations are going to come out with, minimal impact. So that which is pretty important. So the one thing that I like to talk about when we're talking about cybersecurity is, it's easy to be like, oh, that's just IT's problem. No, as kind of the opening slide mentioned, it's everyone's responsibility. And regardless of whatever your industry is and what your job is, chances are that it touches technology in some way, whether that's software, data, email, right? I mean, pretty much most jobs have some sort of interaction with technology. And also, criminals prey on the weakest, path of weakest resistance. So if the front door is open, then they're just going to walk right in. And then also the other big reason why training is important is, depending on what industry you're in, you may be required to have some level of training for basic compliance. So if you deal with healthcare data, HIPAA certainly has requirements. In higher ed, we deal with FERPA. So depending on where you're at, not only is it a good idea, but it may be something that you have to do. So what should training focus on? Well, one, it's one thing to talk a bit about, all the IT stuff, right? And that's great, but really what you want to do is to make sure that the training is grounded in tangible and meaningful ways. It needs to be contextualized. One of the things that I'm having two kids, one of which is about to be a freshman next fall. I've talked to them about their digital hygiene, and we've talked about passwords for email accounts and making sure they aren't sharing credentials. And like the feedback that I hear from my own kids and other students here is like, it's just email. What's it matter? So they own my account. Well, yeah, it is email, but think about what's behind that email account, right? I mean, if you're trying to reset your password on other systems, most of the time those come through the form of email click to verify who you are sorts of things. So think about what, a compromised email account might mean for your business or organization. Training should also focus on just understanding the basic risks, right? So things like ransomware. What is ransomware? How does it impact an institution? Well, it can lead to productivity, right? If you lose your files, that's going to stop work. It could have financial implications because then the organization has to face the decision: do we pay to get out of this? So there's certainly some stuff there. Data exfiltration, right? We talked, Kevin was talking a little bit about that. Somebody steals your data. Think about brand and reputation, not to mention intellectual property. Phishing, that owning an email account could lead to getting access to other systems. I know I have my direct deposit set up, and anytime I make changes, it's attached to my account. So I could personally lose access to my paycheck if somebody were to own my account and then get into the university's portals. It's scary. And then social engineering scams, understanding what those are, and I mean really it's just a tactic to do the other things listed above. So being able to identify those is really, really important. And it's easy to land on, well, don't people already know this? I mean, you can't really watch the news with any regularity and not see some level of reporting of such and such company was owned or had their data harvested or fell prey to ransomware. But when you take a look at the metrics around that, Webroot did some analysis, and they reported that 35% of workers who know that they've been hacked don't bother to change their password afterwards. 49%, so almost 1 in 2 people, admit to clicking links from unknown senders. So yeah, people might conceptually know, but it comes down to, well, it won't happen to me. Well, sorry to say that, that is simply not true. The good news is training does not have to be hard. Good training should be short, consistent, and focused on what matters. One tool that I've recently become aware of and taking a look at the university level is a platform called Ningio. And what Ningio is, they basically produce very short 3 to 4 minute videos. They're written by Hollywood writers. They're acted by big name celebrities, and they're entertaining, right? And they're grounded in real life situations, and they have little quizzes afterwards. So not only do people watch this, become a little bit entertained, learn something out of it, but then they have to apply that knowledge. And the nice thing is, one thing I really like about this is we can kind of control the levers in terms of how frequently that comes out, right? So to Kevin's point, it's tax season. They've got a series of videos that talk about risks associated with phishing and and W-2s and that sort of thing. You can kind of ramp up the volume in terms of how frequently those stuff goes out, and then maybe scale it back if there aren't as topical concerns that need to be brought to attention. So the last thing you want to do is, if you have something like this and have regular cadence on it, is have it turn into wallpaper where people just ignore it. So developing that right cadence is going to vary a little bit by organization, but being able to make sure that they're short, consumable, and appropriate is really important.
Hey, Tim.
And then, yeah.
About 2 more minutes.
Oh boy, okay. So you also should understand if you have any regulatory compliance. So use that as a foundation for what you have to do, and then do more. And it's worth noting that in 2004, the federal government declared October as Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which I think is great. There's lots of good resources. There's some links here that you can have access to in the slide deck. I love Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but it's such an important topic that it's far too critical to be just left for a once-a-year thing. So training, great. Testing is equally as important. So you need to validate that training that you've done sticks. So with phishing being one of the biggest threat vectors, this is definitely one thing you're going to want to take a look at. You can, as an organization, you can look at tools that simulate phishing attacks. Basically, you define a fake phish. Your IT group does that and then sends it out to the tenant. So here's one that we ran. Basically, there's some key things in there that we've trained people on to look for. So things like misspellings, call to action, an elevated sense of urgency. And then what we do is we send that out into the wild, and then we get this analytics dashboard, and it gives us information like how many people clicked through the link, how many people supplied credentials, how many people reported this as phish. And thankfully for us, the last time we did this was really, really good. I think we had a total of 12 people that supplied credentials, and when we kind of peeled back the onion, half of which were IT people just testing to see what would happen. So getting that really small percentage is really ideal. I mean, most of the time, having a 5% click rate is, a 5% click rate is really, really good. So us getting that low number felt us walking away, feeling pretty good. However, it also gives us indication of what we can do next, right? So if we're trying to encourage behavior, that it's not just avoiding the link, but also getting people to report the phish, right? It provides all those analytics. So when you're validating, you want to do a couple things. You want to make sure that you're avoiding shaming, right? I mean, if somebody falls for it, you don't want to, make them feel bad about it. It's a chance for them to learn and for the security team to understand the hygiene level of the workforce. You probably want to do this a couple times a year, right? Consider a crawl, walk, run approach. And let your data guide you in terms of what your next steps and what your follow-up training efforts should be. And then follow up, right? I mean, being able to send out a summary report saying, hey, here's what we found. It lets everyone know kind of what to expect and what, how maybe the organization can improve. And then gamify it, right? Let people know that it's coming, deploy it. And if there's some sort of contest that you can do, like, hey, first 10 people to report it win a gift card. Costs you virtually nothing, and it instills the right behaviors, which at the end of the day is what matters. But it's worth noting, phishing is, simulation is just one type of training. I would encourage everyone to do tabletop exercises, get people to start having conversations around what would you do if we were hit with ransomware? How would employees escalate? Is that process well known? What's the communication strategy? And then also, what are the business continuity plans? Say you get home. What happens if that system goes down? I mean, the last thing you want as an organization or as a business is for work to stop, right? You need to have contingency plans, and people should know what those are and where to look for them. With that said, if there's time for questions, I'm happy to take them, but given the 2-minute warning, I'm guessing I'm out of time.
Yeah, we'll let Jeff present, and then if there's questions and people can stay, then we'll go on with that. So go ahead, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Great, thanks everybody. Can folks see my screen?
Yep.
All right, I'm really happy to be here to join folks on this panel. I'm Jeff Rantato. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Ohio Cyber Consortium, and I will tell you right from the start that I know a whole lot less than Shelley, Kevin, and Jim about cybersecurity. But I had the opportunity to run this organization that basically supports folks like them in the work that they do. So we are a regional business association, got started about 5 years ago, and it was companies like KeyBank and Goodyear and Eaton and Progressive Insurance that were looking for a way to collaborate, to have their information security teams work together, both to share information directly about the threats that they're facing, and more broadly to talk about all of the kinds of things that you've heard from the previous speakers. How do we make an effective, fish testing program? What should we be doing about particular kinds of policies? All of the things that kind of come along with having a mature cybersecurity program for a large organization. Kevin's company, his employer, is an EOC member. Kent State is an EOC member, and I have the opportunity to work both with Jim and his team as well as with Shelley and other faculty members because obviously talent's a big part of cybersecurity. And so if you could imagine a room of 100 people like Jim and Kevin and Shelley talking about what they're working on a day-to-day basis, that's what we're doing in NEOC. So I think the first thing to really sort of focus on, if the question is, okay, what do I do? I'm a small business owner, I'm an IT director for a small and medium-sized company, I don't have Kevin and 10 people like him on my information security team. So what do I do as a small company? I think the first recommendation is find your people. Find your people who care about this same issue, who are kind of in the same boat that you are, and share information with them. And if you can't identify, groups and resources, just really start to build it. And that's where Shelley, I want to congratulate you for what you're doing, and I'm really pleased to hear you say that this is going to be an ongoing effort, and that you're, kind of putting in the infrastructure, the scaffolding and the framework to support, the regional community, because, as Kevin mentioned and as Jim mentioned, every organization of every size has to deal with these challenges. So find your people, whether it's, local geographic, whether it's within your, sector or industry, and also whether it's within your supply chain. So if you're a vendor to larger companies, see what your customers have in terms of resources, because your cybersecurity challenges are their challenges as well. And then, the vendors and the consultants and the folks that you use. So I think that's really kind of the first, the first step. I wanted to talk a little bit about some public resources that are available. I'm going to walk through these each very quickly. Shelley has my slides, so you'll have access to all of these links. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, is really kind of the core federal government organization focused on building out what a cybersecurity framework and cybersecurity best practices ought to be. CISA, which I think Jim mentioned earlier, has a toolkit on Cyber Essentials. The Global Cyber Alliance is a private organization. I think it was originally started by New York PD and London PD. And then Federal Trade Commission also has a set of resources for small businesses. And what's interesting about FTC is that their lens through which they look at it is more around identity theft. So, you've got the technology side and then you've got the business side. And this cybersecurity framework, and Kevin and Jim, I think, are very familiar with this, is kind of a set of pieces on identifying all your assets and understanding the threats that you're facing, protecting. Identifying your assets, protecting them, detecting any kind of unusual or malicious activity to understand whether you're actually suffering from a cybersecurity event or an incident, and then respond and recover. So it's this cycle of preparedness and resilience, and then figuring out how to respond and recover if something happens. There are great resources that kind of walk you through all of these pieces, and I'm just flashing this to give you a little encouragement to go to the website and pull down the documentation. If you're the business owner, if it's your company, if you're the IT director, it's worth your time to start to dig into this just a little bit and figure out what it is you should be doing to make your organization safer. The CISA Cyber Essentials Starter Kit, it's really very similar. You'll see that a lot of these sort of are shared body of knowledge, different frameworks, a little bit different kind of modeling, but it's the way they focus on building a culture for cybersecurity readiness. Start with yourself as the leader of the organization. What kind of culture do you set within your organization? What are your expectations and how do you communicate those expectations? And then supporting your staff, and it's not only your IT staff, but it's also all the users in your organization, because as Shelley mentioned, it's everybody that needs to play a role. It's not just the responsibility of the IT organization. And then look at your systems, look at your surroundings, look at your data, and then what's your response look like. So this is just kind of breaking down all the pieces and parts of the stuff that's a little bit more manageable, that you can kind of, go through a set of tasks, at the end of which you can feel comfortable that you're safer, you're more resilient, and then and then it's easier to kind of just update and keep it fresh.
Thank you, Jeff. Just about 1 more minute, please.
1 more minute, okay. Similar, Global Cyber Alliance Toolkit, Federal Trade Commission, set of categories, bunch of different basics. And again, it's breaking these down into component parts that's accessible. What to do if you have an incident? Report it. Report it to the FBI if it's criminal. Report it to the FTC if it's identity theft. The faster you get to FBI, the more likely you'll get a positive outcome if, for example, funds have been stolen, your systems have been locked, if you report it quickly, then, they can move faster to support you. And when you report to FBI or FTC, it ends up going to the Cleveland field office, our regional field office. So you're getting a local person responding, but you're also getting the national resources, that are behind, law enforcement, and the federal regulatory environment. So it's really a good opportunity to be able to work directly with folks in the region, but get that national level support. There are some local resources, some Ohio-based resources that I wanted to flag for you, and Shelley, this might actually be more for you with respect to future programming.
Okay.
Ohio passed legislation a couple of years ago setting up a cyber reserve within the National Guard. They have units based in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. It's volunteers. So imagine the folks in the MEOC community, folks like like Kevin, who decide that they want to join up and be part of the reserve. They are focusing specifically on local government resilience and response. And then the Cyber Range Institute is a statewide education platform, workforce development platform, led out of the University of Cincinnati. There are a couple regional programming centers outside of Cleveland, and there's also one at Eastern Gateway Community College. And so they tend to focus more specifically on K-12 and students as a workforce development strategy. So I wanted to make sure that I shared those as well. My contact information is here, so I'd be more than happy to follow up with anybody.
Well, thank
I'm
you.
going to turn it back to you because I think there's probably some discussion that we want to get started
Thank
on.
you. So to be respectful of your time, I know that we're over time a bit, so if you do have questions and can stay, please ask them. Otherwise, I'll send out these slides along with the survey to find out, what the appetite is for Lunch and Learn. I hope that there is a big appetite for it. We would love to interface with all of you and engage with your businesses at any level that you would like us to be involved. I think we're a great resource, and we learn as much from you as you learn from us. So what questions do you have? We answered every question, guys, just like with my students, yeah.
Okay, so when you get a phishing email, what is the appropriate thing to do with it?
So it depends on your organization, but the best thing to do is obviously not click on any link, right? Especially if you're not positive that that link is appropriate. So for instance, if you get an email that you think is from your bank, don't follow the link. Go to the bank website that you know is the bank's website, right? Because the link could go to a website that looks identical to your bank's website, right? So following the link is never a good idea. Even if you feel like it might be real, always go directly to your bank link instead of following links in your email. The organization should have an apparatus for you to report that. If they don't, then I would just tell your IT folks, I would tell your direct supervisor, I would definitely, remove it from your email. Delete it, right? Good question. But there again, that's what planning gives you, because, every person should know, what do I do if I get a phishing email? What do I do if I clicked on it? What do I do if I gave my credentials, right? Those are three different scenarios with three different levels of alarm. Right? Good question. Yeah.
So, the typical victim usually is, if they're affected by, say, phishing or whatever, it seems like the vast majority of these hackers are overseas. I guess my question is if it is reported, how, for example, how is the FBI going to handle it if the perpetrator is over in India or Nigeria?
Yeah, That's a good question. They do have mechanisms for that. I mean, they may not be able to bring them to prosecution, but they may be able to at least impact, you know, what happened, trace it, stop it. You know, there have been foreign actors who've been caught doing these things. Do you guys have something to add to that?
I would just add that, you know, that's one reason why reporting quickly is important. You know, the FBI has statistics on something like, if you report within 24 hours, the likelihood of recovery of lost funds is you know, a certain percentage. And one of the things that I would also say is that both FBI, Cleveland, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Northern Ohio are really among the best regional offices at FBI and DOJ with respect to success rates for law enforcement activities and for prosecution. And that doesn't include overseas.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it is a challenge, and that's why I think it's really important to leverage you know, federal law enforcement, because you know, you're sitting in your organization and something is happening, but that doesn't mean that the perpetrator is 2 miles away. You know, even if you're around the world.
Yeah. And it could also be that they're 2 miles away, but they're using, you know, technology that makes them look like they're in China. So we don't really have the in-house capability often to figure that out on our own. So having those resources of the FBI to backtrace that trail is, you know, it's critical to responding to it. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not an easy thing to find out who did things anymore, but it is important. The other thing that it does is it increases our knowledge base of what happened, how it happened, you know, and what were the impacts of that. So that knowledge helps us prepare, right? Good question. Yeah. Anything else? Well, thank you all for staying awake after eating breakfast. Yeah, Lori?
Well, I think 2 things. I think you need to put in a plug for your cybersecurity training.
Okay.
And then I think you need to put in a plug for outside funding for people who have employees in the room who may need upskilling in cybersecurity areas.
Okay.
There
Great.
is state funding available to pay for that. So
Yeah, so thank you, Lori. Yes, we have a multitude of on-ramps for upskilling, reskilling, you know, find someone in your organization who has some talent and interest in cybersecurity. We have an associate degree in cybersecurity. We also have an associate degree in IT, a bachelor's degree in IT with 7 different concentrations, including cybersecurity and forensics, which is the other side of cybersecurity, which is investigation. Cloud and virtualization, networking, you name it, we're in the business of teaching these folks to do it. We can also break those down into smaller chunks called micro-credentials, where, say, one of your IT folks just needs some upskilling in cybersecurity or upskilling in cloud. Those are things that we can provide through the institution. And Lori was talking about TechCred, which is a funding opportunity for organizations who want to leverage those dollars to get their folks upskilled in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, just to speak on TechCred, so you can get $2,000 of reimbursement per employee per training cycle, so it works out to be up to, say, $30,000 in a year in reimbursement to have your employees participate in any of these skills-based training to enhance their skills around cybersecurity, and there's a number of other areas as well. But we've run in TechCred sort of on a rolling basis, and through our email network, we're always sending out information about the TechCred program application process. We just did a webinar about 2 weeks ago on TechCred, and that is available on our website where you can go and find the process that you need to go through to apply for TechCred. But it's a great resource that's ongoing that you can use on a regular basis to get direct reimbursement for those expenditures.
Such a great program.
Yeah.
Such a great program. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. All right, well, thank you again. It was nice to see you all, and I hope you have a great rest of the week and a happy Easter. Thank you.
Real quick, while I have you here, just a quick reminder, Damon West. So we're Growth Partnership is partnering with Huffman Mayer, with Business of Good. On May 2nd, we're having Damon West, who's a nationally recognized public speaker, motivational speaker, in. There'll be